Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
I was the first to arrive at the church, not because I was eager or nervous, but because I didn't want to screw up the one thing that was supposed to be simple, being on time. I stood in the parking lot for a moment longer than I needed to, gripping the small black box that held the watch I'd saved for nearly a year to give her. A quiet, stupid gift compared to the $58,000 I'd already poured into this wedding. But this one had a story. This one was personal. Engraved on the back, to Emily, always your dad. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, letting the cool blast of air-conditioned church lobby push against my face like a reminder that this day was already too formal for someone like me. The wedding planner, a young woman in her 20s with a clipboard and a synthetic smile, stopped me just past the door. "Hi, you're Rick, right?" she asked, tilting her head like I was an old dog she wasn't sure could still walk. "Yeah, I'm the father," I said, a bit too firmly. She smiled again, but this time it was thinner, like someone slicing deli meat. "You'll be sitting in the back, near the center aisle. Right this way." I blinked. I assumed I'd be seated near the front. She shook her head with that same brittle politeness. "Emily's mom said you'd prefer it this way." I didn't say anything, just walked. My footsteps felt too loud on the tile floor as we moved past polished pews filled with people I didn't know. Friends of Doug, I guessed. Extended family from his side. I caught a few stares. Pity mixed with confusion. Like people had been told I was a problem that had been handled. I slid into my seat, 4 rows from the back, and sat down slow, like I was afraid the wood might splinter. The wedding hadn't even started, but my hands were already damp, and my chest felt hollow, like I'd swallowed something too big to pass. Then she walked in. Emily, my daughter. White dress, long veil, smile so wide it almost hurt to look at her. And next to her, walking tall and proud, was Doug, her stepfather, in a crisp navy suit with a boutonniere that matched her bouquet. The room turned to watch them. Phones up. Flashbulbs popping. And I sat there, forgotten. Just a man holding a small black box, watching a memory be rewritten in real time. I couldn't even hear the music. My ears filled with a kind of white noise that only comes when grief pretends to be anger. I wanted to yell, or laugh, or throw the damn watch across the aisle like a grenade. Instead, I just watched. And that's when she leaned over. My ex-wife, Karen. Perfect blonde bob, pearl earrings, and that smile she wore when she was about to gut someone with a compliment. She leaned in and whispered, "You're just the checkbook, not the dad. Don't make this about you." And she leaned back, like she'd just handed me a receipt for the last 25 years. It was almost impressive, the precision with which she delivered the kill shot. No drama. No scene. Just a whisper in the ear of the man who signed the checks and stayed out of the way. My fingers tightened around the box. The watch inside felt heavier now, as if it were absorbing every ounce of shame I was trying not to show. When the pastor asked, "Who gives this woman?" Doug answered with a proud, clear "I do." And I just sat there. Not a sound. Not a breath. Because what the hell was I supposed to say? I paid for the goddamn flowers? No one turned to look at me. Not even Emily. She didn't search for me in the crowd, didn't smile at me as she passed. And maybe that was the worst part, that she didn't even feel guilty. She looked happy. And somewhere, under the humiliation and the heartbreak, a cold switch flipped inside me. I stopped feeling like a father. I stopped trying to be part of a day I was clearly never invited to in the first place. They'd written me out of the story, but they forgot one thing. The one who holds the pen still controls the ending. So I sat there, in my overpriced suit, with my bullshit smile, and I watched my daughter walk away from me with her new father by her side. I didn't clap. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. There's this thing that happens when you spend enough time driving a kid to school, especially when the sun's just coming up and the world hasn't quite remembered how loud it's supposed to be yet. This quiet, subtle understanding forms between you. Like an invisible thread knotted through every shared silence and half-finished sentence. That's what I remember most about Emily at 8 years old, those early morning rides where neither of us really said much, but somehow we still said everything that mattered. It was the year after Karen left. I'd gotten sole custody, mostly because she didn't fight it. I think she was already halfway gone before she moved her suitcase out. I won't pretend I was some perfect dad. I burned more dinners than I cooked right, forgot to sign a couple permission slips, and once sent her to school in mismatched shoes because I thought the lights were broken in her room. But it turned out she'd just been hiding her laundry. Still, I showed up. Every damn day. Rain, shine, or the kind of exhaustion that makes your bones feel hollow, I was there. I remember taking Emily to her soccer tryouts for 5 straight summers, from age 6 to 11. Funny thing, she only played for 3 seasons total. I guess even back then I was trying too hard, always showing up even when no one asked me to, clapping from the sidelines with the loudest voice, even if the score was already 10-0. I kept thinking effort would buy love, or at least loyalty. Turns out, that's not how the math works. But back then, I didn't know that. I thought we were building something real. The house always smelled like peanut butter. That's what she liked for lunch, and I never really learned how to cook anything decent beyond that. I'd try to jazz it up sometimes, cut the sandwich into stars, sneak in a sticky note with a dumb joke, but she'd just roll her eyes and laugh, the way kids do when they love something but can't admit it out loud. And then there were the science projects, the Halloween costumes, the late nights before math tests where I'd be hunched over the kitchen table with her, both of us pretending I remembered how to do fractions. I'll never forget the day she brought home her first boyfriend. I was in the garage, fixing something that didn't need fixing just to stay busy, and she walked in holding hands with this gangly kid wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. "This is Kyle," she said, and Kyle looked like he wanted to crawl into the drywall. I didn't say anything clever, didn't make a scene. Just nodded and said, "You treat her right, or I'll make you cry." She laughed. Kyle didn't. I still stand by those words. But things changed. Slowly at first. A missed call here, a shorter hug there. It was around the time Karen remarried. Doug came into the picture like a walking commercial, charming, successful, always tan for some reason. He had a boat, told good jokes, and he didn't reek of engine oil like I always seemed to. At first I thought it was good. Maybe she'd finally have 2 positive father figures instead of 1 overworked screw-up and a distant mother. But it didn't take long before I noticed the way she said his name more than mine, or how holidays became complicated, and suddenly I was only invited for Christmas Eve lunch instead of Christmas morning. The big shift happened this summer she turned 16. She was quiet that whole week, barely touched her food, wouldn't look me in the eye. Then one night, as I was about to drive her to her part-time job at the bookstore, she just blurted it out in the driveway. "Doug's just easier to talk to, Dad." She said it like it was a compliment. Like I should be proud she found someone else who got her. And maybe I should have been. But hearing that from the girl whose night terrors I used to soothe with lullabies I barely remembered, it broke something I didn't know could still crack. I didn't say anything in return. Just nodded, put the car in gear, and drove her to work. We didn't speak the whole way. She turned the radio on, low volume, a song I didn't recognize. When she got out of the car, she said, "Love you," but it sounded more like a habit than a feeling. After that, it got worse. Calls went unanswered. Her visits became shorter and spaced out, like she was trying to dilute our connection until it could safely vanish without drama. And I let it happen, because I didn't want to push. I didn't want to be the overbearing dad who forced affection where it wasn't welcome. But now, sitting in my car in the parking lot outside her wedding reception, all I could think about was those 17 years I spent building a relationship she seemed so eager to erase. 17 years, 3 days a week, every other weekend, all reduced to 1 seat in the back and a whisper that told me I didn't count. But I hadn't left yet. I was still in that lot. Still holding the small black box in my lap, unopened. And I was waiting. Not sure for what exactly. But something was pulling at me, something old and angry and sharp that I hadn't felt in years. Because love like that doesn't die easy. And forgotten fathers? We remember everything. I don't know what it says about me that I stayed. Maybe I was waiting for someone to notice I hadn't left. Maybe I was hoping for a sign, anything that would tell me this wasn't really happening the way it looked. Or maybe I just wanted to see how far they'd go before someone blinked. So I sat through the ceremony like a man watching his own funeral in a dream, blurry-eyed, not entirely convinced he wasn't already a ghost. After they said their vows, kissed for the cameras, and walked back down the aisle, her hand in Doug's, her smile beaming, I shuffled out with the rest of the silent, forgotten guests and made my way to the country club where the reception was being held. The reception hall was a palace, not a metaphorical one either. Actual columns, marble floors, champagne flutes so thin they felt like holding a breath. And the people? They were wearing suits that cost more than I made in a month, laughing like nothing in the world had ever let them down. I walked in, nodded to no one in particular, and headed straight for the bar. The bartender asked if I wanted an open tab, and I almost laughed in his face. "It's my daughter's wedding," I said. I already paid for everything in this damn room. He didn't get the joke. Poured me a bourbon and moved on to the next guy in line who looked more like he belonged. I found a table near the corner, not quite in the shadows, but close enough to hide. I watched as they danced, Emily and Doug for their father-daughter waltz. The irony of that nearly knocked the glass from my hand. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or flip the table. I chose bourbon. 3 glasses in, I started feeling brave, or maybe just numb. I kept running my thumb over the engraved watch in my pocket, thinking about how it never even made it out of the box. I had planned to give it to her during our dance, a little joke between us, "Don't be late to your own wedding, kid," but the joke never landed, because the moment never came. Then Doug walked over, smiling like nothing had happened, like I was some old college friend he hadn't seen in a while, not the man whose shoes he was busy filling without permission. "Hey, Rick," he said, extending a hand. "Thanks again for helping make today happen. Means a lot to Emily." I looked at his hand, but didn't shake it. Just nodded once, short and hard, like I was keeping my head from exploding. "Sure," I said. Glad I could fund the fantasy. He laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. A few minutes later, the DJ announced the toasts would begin. Maid of honor first, her college roommate, a sweet enough girl with nothing real to say. Then the best man, Doug's younger brother, who looked like he'd practiced his speech in the mirror and still managed to stumble through it. Laughter, clinks of glasses, hugs, kisses on cheeks. The whole thing looked like a damn brochure. But no one called my name. No one asked the father of the bride if he had anything to say. That was the moment I stood up. I didn't ask permission. Didn't wait for the music to stop. I walked straight to the microphone, picked it up like it belonged to me, and cleared my throat. The chatter dropped instantly, like someone had pulled the emergency brake on the entire party. I saw Emily's eyes widen, her mouth part slightly. Karen's face froze. Doug leaned forward in his chair, but he didn't move. Smart. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't yell. Just started speaking. When Emily was 5, she asked me why the sky was blue. I didn't know the answer, not exactly. I said something about air and water and sunlight. She nodded like she understood, but then asked me if the sky would ever change its mind. If it could decide to be red, or green, or something completely different. People started chuckling, polite, and confused. But that was her way, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Like why her mom stopped coming to soccer games. Or why I sometimes looked tired all the time. Or why Doug had a boat, but I only had a rusty sedan. A few faces dropped. The air shifted, got tighter. I watched this girl grow up from scraped knees and tree forts to heartbreaks and high school dances. I stood in the rain with a flat tire the night she broke her arm and refused to leave the ER until she fell asleep. I taught her how to parallel park, how to balance a checkbook, and how to take pride in doing the hard things even when no one's watching. I scanned the room. Most people weren't eating anymore. Some had put their glasses down. I never asked for applause. Never demanded anything in return. I just figured love would be enough. But today, I sat in the back row. No photos with the bride. No dance. No speech. Just a bill. Emily's lip trembled. Karen wouldn't meet my eyes. Doug still hadn't moved. So if I'm not the father, I guess I'll just be the bank that believed in her. Silence. No clapping. No cheers. Just the sound of forks scraping plates and someone clearing their throat near the bar. I set the mic back down gently. Walked back through the crowd like it was a fog that didn't know how to part. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't take the watch out of my pocket. I left the reception and stepped into the cold night air, the silence louder than any speech I could have written in advance. The next morning, my phone lit up like a siren. 17 voice notes. All from Emily. Some sobbing. Some angry. One just silence with sniffles. The last one? Please talk to me, Dad. Please. I didn't know. Please. But I didn't press play again. Not yet. The phone sat on the kitchen counter like it had been waiting for this moment its entire life, vibrating every few seconds as another voice message from Emily landed in my inbox with a soft ping that somehow managed to sound more like guilt than notification. I poured myself a cup of stale coffee, the kind that had been sitting in the pot too long, and took a seat in the same wooden chair I'd once used to teach her how to braid friendship bracelets when she was 10 and heartbroken because her best friend had stopped sitting with her at lunch. Now the chair felt smaller somehow, like grief had compressed the wood beneath me, or maybe I was just carrying more weight than I used to, the kind you don't see in mirrors, the kind that doesn't go away with exercise or time. The first message started with her crying. Not the polite kind of sniffles you hear in a movie, but real, raw sobs, ugly, gasping, coming from deep in the chest where the body stores all the unsaid things. Dad, she started, please don't ignore me. Please. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't know they put you in the back. I listened without touching the screen, arms crossed, shoulders hunched, trying not to react. Because what was there left to say? What apology was supposed to so shut a wound that had been ignored for years? The second message came a few minutes later, and this one was angrier. You ruined my wedding. Do you even realize that? Everyone was whispering about your little speech. I can't believe you would do that to me. I stared at the floor, wondering how quickly people can shift from grief to blame when the reality of a cracked mirror finally hits them. I didn't say anything into the air. Just took another sip of bitter coffee and waited for the next one. The third message was short. You embarrassed Mom. That was it. No emotion, no explanation, just a direct punch meant to hit square in the chest. Like her mother hadn't spent the better part of a decade convincing her I was nothing more than a walking bank account with a beard. The fourth came in quickly after. Doug said you told him you didn't want to be involved. That you were too busy with work to care about the planning. That you didn't even RSVP until the last minute. Why would you lie like that? Her voice cracked on the word, lie, and for the first time that morning, I felt my hand curl into a fist against the side of my thigh. I hadn't missed the RSVP. I had sent it back the same day I got it. Hell, I had paid for the printing of the damn invites, seen the font options myself. But now it was starting to come together, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized were even on the table. Doug had been feeding her stories, quiet, offhand things, probably said in the car or over breakfast, never loud enough to raise alarms, but just subtle enough to make her question who I really was. A smirk when I didn't show up to a brunch I wasn't invited to. A shrug when she asked why I hadn't called after her college exams. Little stories, little omissions, each one placing a brick between us until I was on the outside of my own daughter's life looking in through stained glass. By message 7, her tone had shifted again. I remember when I broke my wrist, and you stayed up all night with me. I remember how you used to put my stuffed animals in a circle around me when I was sick, so I wouldn't feel alone. I don't know why I stopped remembering those things. I closed my eyes. Let that one hit where it needed to. Message 10 was quieter, more exhausted. Doug told me you sold your old truck because it didn't make sense to keep something so sentimental. I always wondered why you never drove it again. I thought you didn't care. But now I'm wondering, who told me that? My knuckles were white against the edge of the chair. The truck wasn't just a vehicle, it was the last thing my father gave me before he passed, and I never sold it. I'd kept it in a storage unit outside of town because it wouldn't pass inspection anymore, but I couldn't bear to let it go. And now she thought I'd tossed it away like it was nothing? Because Doug had said so? The 15th message sounded like she was in a car, breath shallow, voice low like she didn't want someone else to hear. I think he's been lying to me. I think. I don't know what to think. I didn't move. Just sat in that chair like it was made of concrete. Then came the 17th. Dad. Doug told me you didn't even want to be there. He told me you said it wasn't worth the time, that you didn't want to stand up in front of everyone because it would ruin the flow of the ceremony. And I believed him. I believed all of it. I don't know why, but I did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was the one that broke me. Not because it hurt, although it did, but because I'd let it happen. I'd sat back, trying to be the bigger man, the quieter man, the agreeable man who didn't want to start fights or make scenes. And in doing that, I gave someone else permission to write my part out of the story. Doug had been playing the long game, and I hadn't even realized we were on the board. I stood up from the chair, walked over to the drawer where I kept the things I didn't like looking at: divorce papers, closed accounts, old photos with corners curled from heat, and I pulled out the card from my lawyer. His name was Marcus Hayes, and he'd always told me, "You've got options if you ever change your mind." That morning, I did. I made the call. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally understood what they had tried to take from me. And I wasn't going to let them have the last word. The folder was still where I left it, top drawer of the filing cabinet, behind a stack of old tax returns and a manual for a washing machine I hadn't owned in over a decade. I pulled it out slowly, like it was something fragile or cursed, and laid it open on the kitchen table next to a half-full mug of reheated coffee that had gone lukewarm again. There it all was, itemized, time-stamped, notarized. The catering contract, the venue rental agreement, the floral design invoice, even the down payment receipts for the custom lighting and the $1,000 cake no one remembered to serve. My name on every line, my signature in every box. My bank account on every transaction. Not Doug's. Not Karen's. Not Emily's. Mine. I remembered sitting in the office of the venue coordinator, nodding along as she flipped through package options and added zero after zero to the cost, and me pretending not to flinch because I knew Emily deserved the best, and I still believed, maybe foolishly, that being the one to provide it would matter more than the politics of post-divorce parenthood. I remembered the folder she gave me, glossy and thick, with the words "Primary Client," Rick Dunn, stamped on the front in block letters. I had laughed at the time. "Guess that makes me the boss," I joked. The woman laughed too. What neither of us said out loud was that no one was ever going to treat me like it. But now, weeks after the wedding, days after those 17 voice messages played like a slideshow of guilt, I sat in my chair at that old kitchen table and read every clause like it was scripture. Most of it was standard language, non-refundable deposits, damage waivers, liability protections. But then I saw it, highlighted in yellow from a meeting months earlier. All footage and creative assets are the property of the primary payer unless otherwise stated in a separate media release. It hit me like a freight train running in reverse. I own the video. Not the wedding. Not the day. Not the moment she said "I do" and forgot I existed, but the footage. The photos. The raw takes. The soundtrack. The edit. I didn't want to cancel anything. The wedding had already happened, and I wasn't interested in being the kind of man who scorches the earth just to feel tall in the smoke. But I wanted something real. Something lasting. Something that, for once, had me in the frame not just as a background blur or a name on a receipt, but as a presence, whole, undeniable, and unerasable. So I made 2 phone calls. One to the photographer, the other to the videographer. Both conversations started the same way: "I'm the man who paid your bill." And that was all they needed to hear. I didn't yell, didn't demand. Just asked for one thing: an alternate version of the wedding footage. A personal cut. My cut. No shots of me sitting alone in the back. No wide pans that glazed over my face while Doug played the hero. No edits that made it seem like I was a stranger in a room full of family. I asked them to use what I'd paid for to create something quiet, honest, and true. I sent them the audio of my toast. I asked that the film end with it. Fade to black on the line I had delivered through gritted teeth and breaking heart. So if I'm not the father, I guess I'll just be the bank that believed in her. They delivered the edit 3 weeks later on a flash drive tucked into a padded envelope. I watched it once, alone, in the living room with the lights off and the volume low. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. It was just real. My face, my words, my presence, and the long, quiet pause that hung after the final sentence like a question no one wanted to ask. I didn't send it right away. I kept it on my desk for almost a week, unsure if I was trying to punish her or free myself. But eventually, I dropped it in the mail, no note, no return address, just the flash drive and a printed photo I found buried in the back of a drawer, me and Emily in the front yard, both of us covered in mud, laughing like the world had never betrayed either of us. She must have been 8, maybe 9. Her front teeth still crooked, my hair not yet gray. I figured if she opened the package at all, she'd understand what I was saying without needing a word. And after that, I said nothing. Didn't return her calls. Didn't answer the new round of messages that came in waves, some hopeful, some angry, one just the sound of her crying softly into the phone, repeating, I didn't know, like it was a hymn or a curse. I stopped replying, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because I did. Too much to keep trying to squeeze love out of a relationship that had been edited down to a cameo. I wasn't trying to punish her. I just didn't want to audition for the role of dad in a life I had already paid full price to belong in. People say silence is cruel, but sometimes it's mercy in disguise. Sometimes, not speaking is the only way to be heard. I never told anyone what I did. Not Karen. Not Doug. Not even the lawyer. The only person who knows is probably Emily, and only if she watched the video to the end. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't throw punches. I just handed them the bill and walked away. And maybe that's the thing about being forgotten. You learn how to remember everything. Not to weaponize it, but to understand what parts of you can't be sold, rewritten, or replaced. So now, when people ask me about the wedding, if I went, if I danced, if I cried, I just nod and say, yeah, I was there. Because I was there. Long before the cake, the music, the dress, or the guest list. I was there the first time she held a crayon and drew a picture of the two of us on a hill, smiling beneath a crooked sun. I was there when the sky was blue, and all she wanted to know was whether it might ever change its mind. And now, years later, I still don't have the answer. But I know this much. If love without recognition still counts as love, then maybe some of us walk our daughters down the aisle without ever taking a single step.